Let's get going on another portrait now. I'm going to do something a little differently and sketch this one in Willow Charcoal, which is softer than pencils and goes down more darkly. It's also a lot more smudgy. I usually don't even bother to clean up the lines with an eraser, I just rub them off. Put in your guidelines. This is a forward-facing, straight-on portrait, so the guideline for the eyes is right in the center of the head, and the guideline for the nose is right in the center vertically. Then after you have the guidelines in place, sketch the eyes on, and then you can double check your measurements. I just guess the placement at first, and then I use a piece of scratch paper to double check that those eyes are an eye's width apart. And they're usually about half an eye's width from the side of the head. So I'm going to adjust the side of the head a little bit there and there, make those changes. Just like this. And I'll place my other features in terms of the eye length. So about an eye's length down from the bottom of the eye is the guideline for the nose, and then the nostrils line up with the inner corners of the eye. Then about half that eye's length down from the bottom of the nose is the top of the mouth. Then you can start to shape your features with those guidelines in place. Then you can place the bridge of the nose and the little pockets by the eyes, put in some rough semicircles for the irises, sketch in the placement and shape of the eyebrows, and I'll sketch in his approximate hair placement. The ears typically line up with about the top of the eye and the bottom of the nose. The corners of the mouth line up with the center of the eye. So you use those guidelines to quickly place the features, knowing that they're going to be approximately correct. Then you make some adjustments to make this individual portrait more accurate. So I can just erase those guidelines, and I can even use the rough sketching phase to do some rudimentary shading. It's really simple with Willow Charcoal. Since it's so black and goes down so smoothly, you can cover large areas very quickly. So if he has black hair, I can use the edge of my Willow Charcoal stick and just really scribble that in. And I can just quickly fill in that tone. Then I can look for the shapes of the shadows on the face, put those down as shapes. I follow the contour of the face. When you're ready to move on to the finished piece, keep your rough sketch handy and refer to it as a troubleshooting device and as an additional reference throughout the drawing process. So the sketching phase is going to be the same as on the rough sketch. After the initial guidelines are in place with the Willow Charcoal, I'm going to move to a charcoal pencil because I want those lines to be more exact. So I'm going to mark in the placement for the eyes and sketch them where I think that they should go. And I'm using the Willow Charcoal marks so I know that these are actually correct. And then you start to sketch in the features within those guidelines the same way that you did in the tonal study. So I'm starting with the large shapes, giving myself clear guidelines for the placement of the features. I sketch in the feature according to the boundaries of that feature with the upper and lower and left to right side, and then I sketch the feature within those boundaries. Drawing this way from the large shapes to the small, you're sort of chiseling away at the individual features, and doing it that way gives you a much better chance of success. Then see how I'm just adding more and more detail to the features once I know they're in the correct place. I can do the same sort of thing with the eyebrows, drawing a guideline for the bottom first. Once the features are placed, erase those guidelines, and that will help you to see better how the features are coming along. Remember, you can do all the measuring in the world But what it comes down to is the portrait has to look correct. It has to look like the person you're drawing. If something looks off, don't proceed to any farther than this before you fix it. Then once the features have been roughed, you start the more delicate work of making this an individual person. Don't expect it to be fast. Don't expect it to all come whipping together for you really easily. It's just tiny delineations that makes one person's face distinct from another's. So this is a careful, slow process. So I place the pupil in the iris and the highlight in the eye. Make sure that your highlight is consistent from eye to eye. I'm going to carefully reshape some of the lines of the nose. Notice that I'm not outlining any feature. Most of the shape needs to be put in with the blending process, not this outlining phase. When you're ready to start adding tone, I typically start in the eyes. To protect your working surface from smudging, put down a sheet of clean paper and rest your hand on that instead of on the paper itself. And then just start to darken up the lines of the darkest places in the eye. Add the pupils, darken around the irises, that's the colored part of the eye. For help when you're drawing eye, examine your own eye in a mirror. You can see these spokes of color that you can indicate in black and white by just having some darker and lighter areas. Then the eyelashes are dark on the top of the eye. The corners of the eye have some tone in them to show that the eye is round, and also that membrane that's in the corner is a different color, so it's going to show up as darker. Then you need to carefully add a little bit of skin for the bottom lid. Then blend some of those tones with a stomp or tortillon. And you can also add some tone to the upper eyelid. Once your stomp has been used, it'll be a little bit smudgy and dirty, so you can do the shading in those more delicate places with that dirty stomp. And let's add just some of the eyebrow here. Some of those strokes are clear enough that I can see individual hairs in the eyebrow, and some of them just form a block of the shape of the eyebrow. So using those two techniques together, you come up with a feature that is detailed enough to give a clear indication of what it is, but not overly complex so that it looks busy. Then go back in with your stomp and blend out some of those strokes again, using that same technique as you did in the eye. Then I can move down to the nose. I work in the darkest part of the feature first, and then the tip of the nose is almost a circle. And these nostrils are like little wings coming off of the circle. So adding tone to the nose means kind of indicating that tip with a gentle circle, and then lightly adding some tone on those nostrils. Then continue that tone up the bridge of the nose until you have your shadow shape put in the way that it is on the face under these lighting circumstances. And you just use the same process. You develop the lines, then you put down some tone, and then you blend that tone smooth and make it more gradual for all of the features. Then you just work back and forth, building up those tones, smoothing them, adding more tone, smoothing again, until you're satisfied with the entire portrait. For a smoother finish, use little circle strokes. The upper lip is usually slightly darker than the lower. The corners are darker than the lips themselves, and the line that divides them is dark as well. So I put in those dark lines first, knowing that they're going to be blended out, and then I add some lines to the upper lip and maybe a couple to the lower lip, and I just really gradually add some tone, but I only add tone to the upper lip. I put in the tone of the lower lip with the stomp. On the curve of the lips, is up and down like this, so I blend them following that contour. When it comes time to add this shading on the neck and the chin, those are larger areas, so I'm going to use a blunt pencil and look for the shadow shapes on the side of the face and the side of the head that help that head to turn and look three-dimensional. Then I have something to blend smooth on the paper, and I can do that with my stomp. The chamois cloth is going to pick up a lot of the tone, but it will also give you a smoother finish. Let me skip up to the hair now. I'm going to put down the base tone of the hair with Willow Charcoal. Then I can start to add some additional lines in the hair with a charcoal pencil, which is much more precise, and since it behaves more like a graphite pencil, this is the better tool to use for making the flyaway hairs and the more detailed, delicate lines. Then I can fill in some of that tone, just dragging my stomp across here and there. As in everything, see it as the large shapes first, and then fill in a lot of the tone and work with the smaller details within that larger scope. So I'll darken up some of the features and add a little bit more detail, then come back to it and show you what I came up with. And here's the finished portrait. All I did was darken up some of these tones, do a little bit more blending and smoothing. I added intense black in the shirt using a chunk of charcoal on the side, and I deliberately kept that texture different from the texture on the skin and in the hair so that it would read as a different material. It's just that same back and forth process. I built it up several times by adding some tone, blending it smooth, and then adding additional tone on top. So after a certain point, it really becomes a simple matter of determining when you feel that you've pushed the portrait far enough. But now you've seen the process of building up a completed portrait from the sketching phase. I hope that you've learned a lot, and I hope that you join me in the future for more drawing tutorials. Thanks so much for watching.